Hey guys, Mike here with EBR, and this is the Ride1Up Revv Dirt. And while at first glance it may be looking like a gas dirt bike, this is in fact an e-bike. And we're talking a 1,000 watt rear hub motor, a massive 52 volt battery, and I was able to clock over 34 miles an hour out here in the desert. But there are some trade-offs. So let's do a deep dive on this bike, look at the numbers, look at the specs, take it for some rides, and see where the Ride1Up Revv Dirt really shines. All right guys, so the Revv Dirt. Now this has an MSRP starting at $16.95. This is the highest trim level, the DRT, and this one goes all the way up to $23.95. So you can get a hardtail version at $16.95, a full suspension non-dirt around $19.95, and then this DRT version at $23.95. Now this bike is UL 2271 certified, and it ships as a class 2 bike, meaning it's capped at 20 miles an hour. But of course you can unlock it to 28 miles an hour and get those class 3 speeds. But even more fun happens when you contact Ride1Up, agree to their terms, and they will send you a code or give you instructions on how to unlock off-road mode and boost mode, which will essentially remove any speed restrictions. And I was able to get over 34 miles an hour on this bike out here in the desert, which is super fast and fun on an electric bike like this. Now, when it comes to weight, they say this bike weighs 91 pounds. When I got it in for testing, we put it up on our scale, and it came in at 94.1 pounds, just a few pounds off of their estimation. But all in all, as you can see, 90 pounds in general is still a pretty hefty bike. So this is not something you're gonna just toss up on a bike rack or just move around your house really quick. It's gonna take some consideration when you buy this on whether or not you have the means to move it, store it, transport it, things like that. Now, when it comes to colors, this does come in 2 color options. So we have this here, the blackout, which is, as you can guess, all blacked out. But they also have Toy Soldier, which is a color combination with painted accents of green and black. It's actually very cool looking. I kind of like that color better, but I also always like a blackout just on most things in general. Now, when it comes to frame sizing and height, so this comes in a one size fits most style. So one size frame that they say fits riders from 5'3" all the way up to 6'4". Now, I'm 5'11", and I found the fit and reach to be just fine, but I will say if you need to pedal this bike, like treat it like a true bicycle, you've got short 127 millimeter crank arms here, and then you have a fixed seat height, so you're never gonna have proper pedal extension. And let's just be honest, a 90-pound bike, if you're out riding and having fun, and you do run out of electricity or run out of battery power, that's gonna be a pretty unfun ride home. So if you're gonna get this, just definitely keep the size and weight in mind. At 90 pounds, you're not gonna toss this on a bike rack or just hold it over your shoulder while you go upstairs. Just put some thought into that because it does have some size and weight to it. Now, some geometry numbers for this bike. It's got a 53-inch wheelbase, so from front hub back to rear hub here. The seat height is at a pretty tall 34 inches, and then up top you have 15 inches of reach. Now again, the seat cannot be adjusted because of this moto-style framing we have here. So that 34-inch seat height is fixed at 34 inches. And the payload on this is 350 pounds. Now the tire and wheel combo they went with is a 20-inch alloy wheel that has 12-gauge spokes, stainless steel spokes, as well as an Innova 20x4-inch true, like almost dirt bike tires, very knobby, very aggressive, and very capable, even out here in this chunky, rocky desert landscape that we have. Now, when it comes to fenders and mounting points, the bike does come with a front and rear fender. Now, these all are polycarbonate and black, which I think is even better for a bike like this. You don't want a metal fender out here. It's gonna get banged up, dented, rusted. So I think plastic fenders are the way to go on this bike. Now, when it comes to mounting points, you have mounting points in the rear for the Ride1Up Connect Rev rear rack, or you can get additional seating that extends back for a passenger on the rear end. And this bike also has several mounting points on these modular plates. So you could do some things here, but really the star of the packing your gear show on this bike is going to be this MOLLE panel. Now, if you're not familiar with MOLLE, I think it originated through military usage, but essentially it's a scabbard board that allows you to take MOLLE compatible gear, which you can find all over the place. And it has these interweaving straps. Personally, in my truck, I keep a first aid kit in my truck that has MOLLE straps. And if I was to have this bike, I would just be grabbing my first aid kit from my truck, using those same MOLLE straps onto this, and I'd have some gear with me, first aid with me on my trip. It's a very versatile, kind of a really cool, unique way to deal with this empty space where a true moto frame would have a gas engine. And in this case, it just becomes a cool storage area with this MOLLE panel. Now, if you don't want to deal with the MOLLE panel, they also offer a cargo box that fits into that same space. And it's about 6 inches wide, which is about on par with the width of the frame. And then it's going to be the same dimensions you can see visually here. And when it comes to lighting, this bike does have a full moto style headlight up front. It's got high beams, it's got low beams, and a nice moto style Ride1Up branded fairing around it, giving it a very cool front end look. In the rear, we do have a full taillight and brake light as well. So your lighting is covered front to back on the Rev1 Dirt. All right, when it comes to power, so the Rev1 Dirt has a 1,000 watt rear hub motor made by Bafang, and it has 95 Newton meters of torque. Now you have 5 riding modes, you have PAS 1 through 5, but then like I said, also you have your off-road mode with a boost activation. Now the way that works is when you get the unlock code from Ride1Up, that will allow the bike to basically have no speed restrictions. And like I said, I kind of topped out around just over 34 miles an hour, but that can be had in 2 ways. If I did just off-road mode, it'll get to that same 34 miles an hour I found, but if I activate boost mode, which is simply just holding the minus button while it's in off-road mode, and then you'll see a little lightning bolt on the display. When that happens, you essentially allow all the amperage, so you have a 35 amp controller on here, and that will just give you a full blast, and it'll get you to that speed just a little bit quicker. So it doesn't change the top end at all, it just changes how fast you get there. Now I will say, if you're gonna use things like PAS 5, off-road mode, and especially something like boost mode where you're maxing out all 52 volts, 35 amps on the controller, you're just gonna run through battery faster with a wider smile on your face. Now, when it comes to the battery, so we have a massive 52 volt battery up here. Now this battery is kind of held in place between the framing of the moto frame here, and I think it gives it a nice look, almost masquerading as a gas tank on a true dirt bike. I think they really designed this well to keep kind of the heart of a dirt bike aesthetic while still being an e-bike with a battery on it. Now this battery is 20 amp hours, giving it 1,040 watt hours of power, and it has the ability to lock or unlock in place for off the bike charging. I'll show you how it comes off here. So we do have a keyhole here on the side. Also on the side of this battery, if you notice here, there's a little button. You can just at a glance take a look at the battery power. But put the key in, flip it 180 degrees, and then you're gonna wanna pull the key back out, because if you leave it in when you pull the battery up, it's gonna get caught on this bar. So I'll pull the key out, I'll slide the battery back on its little track rails, and that allows you to simply just lift it up. Now this is UL 2271 certified and does have a 1-year warranty, along with the rest of the bike. That would just be a part of Ride1Up's full warranty. It's also got off the bike charging ports here and an on-off switch for the battery itself. So to put it back, you're simply gonna put it in the same orientation with the little grip handle towards you, drop it on these tracks right here, and you'll feel it fall into place. There it went, and then you push forward, lock it in there, and then you just finish that off with the key, rotating it back 180 degrees back down, and it's locked in place, good to go. Now when it comes to range on this bike, they say it can go between 30 and 60 miles, but that's using pedal assist, and I was curious about just real world usage. I'm gonna guess that if you're buying this bike, you're not training for the Tour de France, you plan on throttling this everywhere you go. So I did just that. I did a full throttle only ride, which gave me almost 2 full hours and 30 miles of range, which on an e-bike is super fun, and with speeds that it can achieve, it was just a really cool ride. Over 20 miles an hour average for 2 hours. It was a lot of fun to do. So when we talk about the drivetrain and componentry on the Rev1 Dirt, things get really interesting. So it's not a pedaler or cyclist bike like we kind of already mentioned, but it does have a single speed setup. So we've got a 14-tooth rear cog, a 42-tooth chainring up front that does have a double-sided chain guard, and it's mated to those 127mm crank arms with alloy flat well-go pedals that do have traction studs and reflectors on them. Now, one thing I wanted to give a nod to the brand for, they did add this little, now I don't know why they've added it, but I think it is to keep tension on the chain at all times, because it is adjustable and it does have no chain slap when you're out jamming, and you can really kind of tear things up on this bike. We've gotten air on this bike, we've had a lot of fun with it, and I never had issues with chains falling off or chain slap, so kudos to them for kind of taking that into account when they designed this bike. Now, when it comes to braking, it's another area they did a bang-up job. We've got 4 piston caliper brakes mated to 203 millimeter rotors that are also 2.3 millimeters thick. That's a pretty big bump in spec over everything. We usually see 2 piston calipers, 180 rotors, 1.8 thickness. This is a bump front to back, and I think that was the right thing to do because this is a 90-pound bike. You're moving it around on technical terrain, moving fast. It's just a bike you want to have good stopping power, and that's exactly what this bike has. Very good, powerful stopping power, a little bit of modularity. You can play with the braking a little bit, but all in all, and most importantly, safe stops whenever you want them. Excellent job on the brakes. Now, when it comes to suspension, I'm going to start in the rear here. We have a DNM coil shock that has 76 millimeters of travel. And the really cool thing about this DNM shock is it has rebound and damping control to really let you fine tune how that shock feels. Now, I will say, as soon as you sit on this bike, you kind of feel this shock settle into its sag position, and it's really well done. I was very surprised, and I will tell you guys, I was one of the first people in the office to think the suspension setup wouldn't be, I don't know, up to par with what you want on a bike like this, but it absolutely is. And I'll talk about that front fork in just a second. But on my way, there is a nice all-weather saddle here. Now, this saddle is, like I said, all-weather kind of outer material, not quite leather, almost like a rubber or poly material, but it's just got good durable feel to it, and it's going to stand or withstand the weather conditions. Now, it is fixed, so you can't adjust the height. You could potentially fit a second person in here, but remember, they do sell that seat extender if you want to have a passenger with you. Now, moving up front, that double crown inverted front fork with 150 millimeters of travel. This is made by RST. It is a coil fork, but I will say this fork feels really good. The only issue I had with it at all, and it wasn't even an issue, it's just more of a pet peeve, it has top out slap. So essentially it's always under a spring load. And when this front tire comes off the ground, whether you did a curb, a wheelie, jumped, it doesn't matter. When that fork slaps out the way it should, there's just no rubber bump stop. It kind of has a louder slap sound to it. I just like to see that quieted up over time, but nonetheless, it performs really, really well. Now, it does have a lockout and preload feature as well. And all in all, the suspension on this is surprisingly good. Now, when we talk about the cockpit here, we've got a 45 millimeter fixed stem, I think with a 6-degree rise on it. And then we have this 720 millimeter wide alloy bar that does have a 25-degree sweep backwards and a 120 rise to it, 120 millimeters. The brake levers are on both sides. You have lock-on rubber grips on both sides, as well as your twist throttle here, your high and low beams, and your electric horn. And then in the center, you have your full display. Now, there's no app on this bike, so let's go ahead and take a deep dive and closer look at the display on the Rev1 Dirt. All right, so this is the home screen, or kind of the only display screen you're gonna need while using the Rev1. So up here, we've got our battery bar indicated by 5 bars, each bar representing about 20% of your charge. Over on the left, you've got your assist level, which is just managed through these plus and minus buttons, typical PAS 1 through 5. Your current speed is in the center here. Your average speed is on the bottom right, and your current odometer right now at 96 miles. Now, if you want to go into off-road mode, which you can see it's on right here, and then boost mode is right here indicated by the little lightning bolt in the circle, which you toggle on and off by holding the minus button for a couple seconds. There it went off, and I'll bring it back, holding the minus button, and there it's back. Now, to get into the off-road mode, again, you'll just need to contact Ride1Up. They'll give you a code to deal with that. And then if you want to change between miles per hour and kilometers per hour, you hold this menu button and it takes you to advanced settings. It's the only one you can access without the code. Simply toggle between miles per hour and kilometers per hour. And then anything beyond that, you'll need a 4-digit code from the company. To get out of this, you'll just hold the menu button again. And all right, guys, we're out here on the Ride1Up Revv1 Dirt. And we're currently in our public lands out here. This is an area that's unrestricted vehicle usage. It's no big deal. People do it out here every day. So as you can see, we're on this gravel road. This part's fairly smooth, but even in the spots that were not very smooth, they were a lot more chunky. The bike does a really good job of eating that stuff up. You know, the 150 mils of suspension, plus the rear shock, rebound and damping, it just does a really good job. It handles all this really well. Also, it's very comfortable because of this super wide and thick moto style saddle. Now that comes with a trade-off, and that trade-off is you have no pedal extension, you have no way to adjust the saddle. it just is what it is. But I will say, it's super comfortable, and it actually makes riding stuff like this a lot more fun. See if we can hear that top out slap on the fork I was talking about. There we go. Let's hit one of these. Nope. There it is. That little jump did it. Do one more. There we go. So as you can see, when you come off of jumps and that coil, because it's under pressure, it slaps out. Now that's normal. I just like to see some sort of bump stop or something put in there to quiet it up. But all in all, it's very plush, which is even better and more important in my opinion. But these whoop-de-whoops, all this stuff is just handled really well. The suspension feels good, and that 1000-watt motor is just fun. It's fun to play with. Woo, that's like a little moto section. This would really be fun for kids, families. Going to the campsites, you want your pit bike with you, something to explore that's got the muscle to have a little fun. Just really shines in all those areas. Now let's turn on boost mode as we're heading out of this area. Talk about speed. So class 2 is how it ships, limited to 20 miles an hour. You can go in here and make it class 3 to 28 miles an hour. And then here we're in off-road mode, which is up to 35. Well, at least that's what we've gotten out of it. But if you activate boost mode, it doesn't change the top speed, but it bumps up full power to the controller, which lets you get everything faster. So let's turn on boost mode. We'll hold the minus button. There we go. Yeah, so that little lightning bolt comes on the screen. Now we'll be able to get just full power. So we'll get up to speed, and then we'll play with the brakes a little bit. But let's see how quick we can get up to speed here. So 3, 2, 1. A little tire spin out in the back was kind of fun. I'm actually going uphill right now. And here we are up to about 22, 25. 30. Woo. So I got about 32 on that one. I've been out here for about an hour, and I'm down to 2 bars left on here, which explains why we didn't hit 34 that time. But I've been playing with it all around, and it's done a really good job. One of the best parts about this bike, as far as the design, was just accounting for the weight of it with the braking setup. So those 4-piston calipers, 203 millimeter rotors with a 2.3 millimeter thickness. It's very effective braking. We're currently going 20 now. Let's keep that going and then hit our brakes. So we'll go 3, 2, 1, stop. So as you can see, pretty quick there. Now, if you noticed, maybe you can see or maybe not, but my legs are not pedaling at all. Let's do a little pedaling and see what that feels like. All right, I'm gonna turn that boost mode off again. All right, boost mode's off. We're just gonna do some regular pedaling. I'm gonna bump it down. Well, I'll leave it on PAS5. So we'll start pedaling. Ooh, tiny 127 millimeter crank arms, but once you get going, you can see it's got no problem getting up to speed. But my legs, I don't know if you can see it, my legs are going up and down really fast because of those small crank arms. So it's just a twofold, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, you got pedals, so you can technically ride this bike should you run out of battery power. And on the other hand, it's just not going to be fun. Other than that, the thing's super fun just to rip around on. You can jump on it well. I mean, you can get a lot more air than I did. and it handles it really well, which is the best part. Sometimes these bikes, not necessarily from any one brand, but in general, sometimes these e-bike companies will put together what they say is super off-road capable, and it's just not because of whatever reason that may be. Bad components, bad suspension, bad geo. But in this case, it all flows together and actually works really well, which is nice. So let's go back. We'll talk to Ben, and then we will wrap this up. All right, guys, this is where we meet with Ben, our in-house mechanic, who has tons of time wrenching on bikes and some really good insights about how these bikes are built. And he's going to share his thoughts today on the Rev 1 Dirt. Now, Ben, I'm going to let you do your thing and step out of the way, but I want to say thank you to Feedback Sports for their toolkit and their stands. If you guys have not checked out specifically this Pro HD rack, it's made of aluminum, super durable and beefy components, and we've been able to take it everywhere and use it on all sorts of bikes, just not this one because of the frame tubing material. But in general, if you want to check out their stuff, there will be a link down below in the description. Ben, just go ahead and kick it off with things you like about the Rev 1 Dirt.
All right, sure thing. Thanks, Mike. I really dig this little bike. This is a fun one to cruise around on. Starting from the front and moving to the back, man, this big inverted fork is awesome. It feels great on this bike when you get off-road, 20, 25 miles per hour. Going through turns, even some of the rocky stuff out here, it feels great. Almost no stiff or flex at all. And then also partner that with a big, I think it's a 20 millimeter through axle. There's just a lot of stiffness on the front end. For a bike like this, man, they almost have to be there, and they are, so it's perfect. I do like also that it's a single speed. You know, when you get a bike like this that can start ripping on the trails and going over some bumps, there's no derailleur slap, there's no back end chatter or anything like that, so it just keeps it nice and tight. Also makes it look really simple and sleek, so gosh, it just looks good. The tires on this, I love these tires. As heavy as they are, there's a ton of meat on these things. They're ready for anything, and that means dodging punctures. Down here we have a lot of little thorns, and there's construction pretty much everywhere anyways, so these tires will just evade lots of flat tires or chances of flat tires. One thing that I tend to rant about from time to time on these types of bikes is they'll come with plastic pedals. These have got some nice aluminum pedals, and I'll touch on that in just a second, but that they're aluminum is really nice because you're going fast on this bike. It's a full suspension. So if and when you crash, that just makes it so the pedals won't break first and you can run those things a little bit longer. That being said, with the suspension on this bike, the rear is awesome. It does have, it's hard to see, but it's got a compression and a rebound adjustment. So as a rider, those are hard to understand fully until you get on the bike and start really understanding what compression versus rebound means on a coil shock. But for someone who does know or would like to find out, this gives you those adjustments. I think it's incredible. The last thing to touch on are the brakes. This thing should and does come with some very thick e-bike specific rotors, a very large diameter, and also 4-piston caliper. So this thing gets up in boogies, but it also slows down real well too.
Nice, man. What kind of things would you improve on the Rev 1 Dirt?
This one, you know, it's a good match to have a coil on the shock, and it's got a steel coil in the fork. But part of me just wishes it had an air fork. It would be more tunable, infinitely adjustable for higher speeds, heavier riders, more aggressive riders, that sort of thing. You can adjust the spring preload, which is a really nice thing. You almost have to, for sure, but an air fork, man, that would be a really nice addition to this. And also, as far as the fork is concerned, there's no rebound adjustment and there's no top out bumper. So when you go off of a curb or when you lift off, it tops out and it makes a kind of a clunking noise, and that's pretty easy to avoid at a manufacturing level. You can put a rubber bumper on the inside, so when you lift up, it just doesn't have a dry clunking noise. I wish that that would go away because it just makes it seem cheap, and it's not a cheap fork. The next thing, I think on a bike like this does have an older school square taper bottom bracket spindle. I've touched on it a few times before, and for sure a bike that's this robust, this beefy, and this awesome, an oversized spindle in the bottom bracket, man, it would just tie this thing together really, really nice. The one last thing I'll touch on is the size of the bike. To pedal it, it's not such a big deal because this really isn't a bike that you're going to pedal, but man, I wish that they could have an engineer make little adapters that would mount on these screws. The screws are already here, the bolts are already here. Some little aluminum pieces that would just be able to raise the seat up, maybe even just an inch, maybe even just 2 inches, to allow you to have a longer leg extension, so you would be able to pedal it more if and when you chose to, rather than just throttling around.
Nice, man. All right, Ben, we appreciate your time on that.
All right, thanks guys.
All right guys, the Ride1Up Revv Dirt. It's pretty much exactly like we expected. It's a whole lot of fun on and off road, tons of power, tons of speed for an e-bike. And it's really something that when you consider the full suspension setup on it, the massive battery and range, the 4-piston caliper brakes, it's just a good value for its price point. Now, it's still good to remember what you'd be getting into if you bought this. At 94 pounds, you can't simply throw this on a bike rack or move it around with ease. And with the tiny crank arms on it and fixed saddle height, you're never really going to be doing any true bike riding on this, just simple pedaling unless you run out of battery. And let's just be honest, guys, that's not going to be fun on this bike. Now, I think you probably know that going into it, and if that's still the style of bike you're looking for, this should definitely be on your list. Now, if I have missed anything you want to know about it, just drop a comment down below. I do my best to reply to everybody who comments on the videos, even the ones who are not so nice to me. With that said, if there's anything I missed, guys, drop a comment down below. I do my best to reply to everybody. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel while you're here. And until the next review, I will see you guys out on the trail.